Hello and welcome to The Record, our look at events in Parliament, where after a day of impassioned debate, MPs have voted for the controversial rise in university tuition fees.
The ayes to the right, 323. The noes to the left, 302.
With thousands of noisy protesters again surrounding Parliament, MPs engaged in fierce argument inside the chamber, the tripling of the fees unleashing strong feelings.
We have opted for a set of policies that provides a strong base for university funding.
If this fee increase goes through, English students and graduates will face the highest fees of any public university system anywhere in the developed world.
We've had tuition fees in place for over a decade, and what has actually happened to student numbers? They've gone up by 44%.
Members opposite have to put themselves in the position of those ordinary families.
Also on this programme, once bitten, twice shy. An MP offers thoughts on what to do with aggressive dogs.
I suggest to the Minister that we need compulsory licensing and chipping and muzzling of dogs, especially those who are known to be aggressive.
But first, the government has won the all-important Commons vote on the raising of tuition fees for students in England. Universities will be able to charge up to £9,000 a year, leaving graduates with large debts after they finish their university courses. The day produced resignations by Liberal Democrat MPs and much drama inside and outside Parliament. The 5-hour debate was set against a backdrop of more noisy student protests around Westminster. Again, police were stretched to contain the thousands of students and other demonstrators who'd converged on Parliament to vent their anger about the tripling of the fees. At moments, police fought to keep back the protesters who tried to break through the police lines. As before, much of the anger of the students was directed at the Liberal Democrats, who campaigned in the election against tuition fee rises. The picture inside the Commons was calmer, but there was plenty of noise generated by angry MPs as the Lib Dem Business Secretary Vince Cable started the debate on what's become by far the biggest issue facing the coalition government.
The right honourable gentleman will be heard. And if members are making a noise and then expecting to be called, I fear that's a triumph of optimism over reality. Secretary of State Cable.
I hope that nobody opposite is seriously arguing that we should drastically reduce the number of students, that we should drastically reduce maintenance, or that we should simply withdraw funding from universities. The only practical alternative was to retrieve income for universities from high-earning graduates once they have left. And that is the policy that we are pursuing. And today, 50 university vice-chancellors have come forward and endorsed this approach to the strengthening of university fundings in the long term.
Under the fees scheme introduced by the Labour Party, all universities ended up charging at the highest rate. One of the worries out there is that all universities might end up being allowed to charge the 9,000 rate. What assurance, what rules, what guarantees can my friend give that exceptional will be exceptional and 6,000 will be the limit for most universities in the country?
There have been very difficult choices to make. We could have made a decision to drastically cut the number of university students. We could have cut student maintenance. We could have cut the funding to universities without replacing it. But instead, we have opted for a set of policies that provides a strong base for university funding, which makes a major contribution to reducing the deficit and introducing a significantly more progressive system of graduate payments than we inherited. And I'm proud to put forward that measure to this House.
Order! Question is order!
Fees are being trebled simply to reduce the 80% cut in the funding of university teaching, not to raise extra money. Most graduates will be asked not to pay something towards their education, but to pay the entire cost of their university education. Universities will have to charge £7,000 to £8,000 simply to replace the money they lose, and many universities will lose 90% of their public funding. That is what is at stake today. If this fee increase goes through, English students and graduates will face the highest fees of any public university system anywhere in the developed world. Higher than France, higher than Germany, higher, yes, than the United States of America. I give way.
Honourable gentleman for giving way. And will he welcome the fact that the repayments threshold is being increased to £21,000 and that anyone earning less than £25,000 will be paying less than £1 a day for their university education?
If the government's real aim was to ease the pressure on the lowest paid graduates, I would support that. They would only need to have made minor changes to the current scheme to achieve that aim. There is nothing about that tiny benefit to the lowest income graduates that justifies doubling or trebling the debt of the vast majority of graduates. And the IFS said yesterday that graduates from the 30% of poorest households will pay more.
The last figures available were while the Shadow Minister was in government, that of the 80,000 children on school meals, only 40 went on to Oxford, free school meals went on to Oxford and Cambridge. Does he not accept that his proposals for graduate tax would mean less social mobility and those paying a higher amount back at an earlier stage?
But I was a minister once who resigned on a point of principle. And I will say to those ministers and backbenchers who are considering their position today, I do know what you're going through. It is very hard to stand aside from friends and colleagues with whom you've shared many a battle. But I'll say this, after you've done it, you realise it wasn't half as bad as you thought it would be before you did it. The self-respect you gain far outweighs any temporary loss of position, power or income. And the truth is that in any generous political party, and mine is not the only generous political party in this House, there is usually a way back. Mr. Speaker, this decision matters so much to so many people. I'd say to the House, if you don't believe in it, vote against it.
Well, after the early exchanges between the two front benches, debate on the fees rise spread out onto the back benches.
Now, Mr. Speaker, I make clear that I am a government backbencher and I support this coalition government and I support what it is doing. And I also support and understand and accept that in the coalition both parties and MPs within it have to compromise. But let me tell you, Mr. Speaker, being asked to vote to increase fees of up to £9,000 is not a compromise. And it is not something that Liberal Democrat backbenchers or even many Conservative backbenchers should have been asked to consider.
If we had a proper procedure, someone said, what procedure would you like? We have a procedure. We have a procedure that means you introduce a piece of legislation and you have a green paper and you discuss it. And then you have a white paper where the government has firmed up its ideas. And in that process, you actually talk to the people that work in universities, the people that study in universities, do the wonderful research in our universities. You actually talk to the community.
So what we find is that the countries in the world in which universities make the biggest contribution to social mobility are those with the highest fees. Now, how can this be? I agree it is counterintuitive. I'm not going to deny to the honourable members opposite, this doesn't seem to be how you would expect people to behave.
Will it put students going off to university? Well, we've had tuition fees in place for over a decade, and what has actually happened to student numbers? They've gone up by 44%. 44%. And why have they gone up? Is because students realise that having a good degree adds value to their prospects. It is a passport to a better job. And OECD figures clearly indicate in the UK all graduates on average earn 50% more than those who finished at A-level.
Does he agree with me that those people on the other side of the chamber arguing that the students needn't be frightened of £9,000 a year fees because they will not be paying the money up front? Their problem is they entirely fail to recognise that if you come from a family where no one has ever been to university, where maybe no one in your immediate family has stayed at school past the ages of 16, the prospect of debts of 50,000, possibly 100,000 if you want to be a doctor, must be off-putting. Members opposite have to put themselves in the position of those ordinary families.
I speak from my own experiences, both as I've mentioned on numerous occasions, a former school teacher, and also somebody who was, as many members are in here, I'm not unique in this, the first person of my own family to attend university. And I did so on a full grant with all of my tuition being paid shortly before tuition fees were introduced. And I could only think about the impact these fees would have had on myself and on my family when I was growing up. Would my parents have encouraged me to attend university had they thought I was going to come away with debts of about £40,000 or £50,000? I don't think so, Mr. Speaker.
As many honourable members have noted, it is sometimes a difficult conversation when people of our age, I'm sorry because of the time I can't, when people of our age have conversations with today's teenagers about university tuition, because of course it is startlingly obvious that we got an incredibly generous deal. But the point is, that deal was always based on it being available to a relatively small number of people, and we were just the beneficiaries. In the year I was born, Mr. Speaker, 414,000 people were in full-time higher education in this country. When I went to university, it was 660,000, and now it's 1.3 million. And when you have changes of that magnitude, you do have to have a fundamental rethink about how you pay for those things.
This administration will be worse for our constituents than even the Thatcher administration was, and that ruined lives and wrecked communities. If Liberal Democrat members opposite file obediently through the government lobby tonight, their betrayal will not be forgotten, and they will never be taken seriously again by their constituents.
And a recent poll from Ipso Mori found that raising fees to £5,000 a year would deter almost half of those from deprived backgrounds who would otherwise have gone to higher education, while raising fees to £7,000 would cut the number by nearly 2/3, let alone £9,000. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, this shamefully short debate, where members should have had the proper opportunity to take part, and I would have indeed taken interventions had the opposition, had the government not shamefully curtailed this debate. This debate will rage on out there, Madam Deputy Speaker, amongst the disgusted people of this country.
It will saddle students with debts of £27,000 for fees alone, never mind the rest of it. Ask any young person in any of our inner city areas, any poorer communities in our country, what is your prospect? What do you want to do? Many would say, I want to study, I want to qualify, I want to go to university, I want to achieve something in life. Tell them that unless they are very poor, they're going to have to pay these fees. They're going to have to borrow money to survive, to get through university. They simply will not do it.
Mr. Speaker, in the week since the Brown Review was published, I have persistently sought to persuade the government to amend its proposals to make them fairer. The government has responded constructively and listened, while others have failed to set out a fair and affordable alternative. In this way, we are making things fairer, and although there is more to do, I am confident that ministers will continue to engage with those issues. That is why I will join them in the iLobby this afternoon.
I appreciate him pointing out the progressive natures of the measures we are proposing. Isn't it incredible that the party opposite, who actually introduced the principle of graduates paying and voted for 2 tuition fee increases, is able to drum up quite so much fake anger on the issue this afternoon?
And a few minutes later, the government won the vote.
The ayes to the right, 323. The noes to the left, 302.
order. The ayes to the right, 323. The noes to the left, 302. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock.